On YouTube, the term about 120 is complexity. Basically, this is something that is both something objective and something that can be reflected upon. In my view, complexity cannot be necessarily reduced. While one can think about complexity as a problem to be solved, there are no obvious problems, or let's say there are no obvious solutions. And of course, one can flip myself of the tongue and say that indeed the obvious problems have already been resolved, especially in the age of AI. A lot of things can already be, let's say, fed into ChatGPT, and that one will receive a pretty decent analysis, and that would definitely cover obvious problems. Whereas if we think more deeply the phenomenon of complexity, it means that there are non-obvious problems as well. So that means that the solutions that one will have to think of will not necessarily be obvious as well. And I would say in the age of, let's say, intelligent machines, of superintelligence, which comes not necessarily in the distant future, but in the near future, maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe in the year after that. So what will humans will be doing after that? In other words, anything, especially as maybe various new companies which will be able to leverage automated processes will start to be more common. And I think that in the creative economy it becomes more or less the norm when one has to build a career around processes which are largely automatic, largely based on software, and increasingly involving AI as a condition of the possibility. Because of all that, a lot of initiatives would simply fall flat, or would be simply theoretical, not hypothetical. So it means that there will be, or there already is, a growth in complexity in the way career courses are charted, or we say things exist in reality on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are not tools. And I think that if one starts thinking about complexity as both a way to describe theoretically certain situations which could be of any time, and a way of actually going about those in a way that will not oversimplify, and and in a way that will be phenomenologically exploring what is in the situation which is complex, and then trying to create its maps, its routes, its points of confluence, or points of divergence. Then it could be also relevant to somebody not so much trying to solve complexity, because probably it doesn't have a solution, but maybe trying to bring more of a map-making skill to managing a complex situation, to managing a complex set of issues. And I think this can have a lot of future, especially in the present day, when a lot of situations internationally in the global economy, in the national daily life, become more dynamic with all the technology, with all the social media input, with all the the case of daily life becoming even more frenetic. And then it means that there may not necessarily be any practical, or let's say any practicable solutions, but one may still need some sort of map making input, some sort of on the spot maps, on the spot sense of, okay, where the flow is going, where what could be like a key inflection points, what could be key landmarks, etc., etc. It's a thing that in itself complexity offers a lot of once again non-obvious tools, non-obvious ways of thinking about a lot of things, and it seems that one could have a lot of materials to discuss. And one could think, of course, about the post-structuralist mode or say postmodernist theory, which I would say was one of the first efforts to think complexity as it is. And let's say if one thinks about the book by Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, The Thousand Plateaus, and it is one of the more complex books, and it is one of the more important books in social sciences and humanities. And then one could also think that go beyond those confines, and maybe one could also combine that with economics. Maybe one could also combine that with other social sciences, or maybe applied fields and business analysis, or in the practice of consultancy. And I think that complexity can also be something to think of in terms of aesthetic um, reflection, let's say, not necessarily when one thinks about a single work of art, but maybe when one thinks about events, let's say international art fest, international exhibitions, international biennale exhibitions. Because what is common to all these events is actually the extreme complexity in terms of the mise in terms of how many works are there on show at the same time, how many sites are involved in each case, and once again, what I've learned from those reviews of these exhibitions is that there is so much to cover, and there's so much complexity that it seems that there's no way one can have an overarching view, or let's say a simplifying view which will come close, or which will come anywhere close to what the event and what the state of affairs actually is. And it seems that this lesson can be applied elsewhere as well, when we can argue that in many cases there has been such a strong growth of complexity that it will never permit a simplification to something that maybe a person who is not versed in the internal knowledge would understand. And I think, let's say, in more recent history, we can think of the great financial crisis, which did not involve any conviction. And I think, while on the one hand, one can argue that those responsible for the crisis were not made legally guilty for that. On the other hand, one can also say that the very complexity of the financial world, of the interactions between the regulation, the digital tools, extreme forms of financial innovation, and together those phenomena and many others as well, let's say, such as the behavior of, let's say, individual banks, investment bodies, etc., which has created a very complex situation which could not be neatly simplified into issues of individual responsibility, maybe guilt, etc. And I think, whereas one may be unhappy with that, one can still appreciate that any efforts to simplify could fall short. And I think that over the years that have followed, the level of complexity across domains has only increased and has become imbricated with lots of similar preconditions, such as the deployment of digital tools, such as the increase in regulation, such as the increasing complexity of the behavior of the actors in this or that field. And it seems that whereas previously one could think about, let's say, grand theories, which would of necessity simplify complex states of affairs. At present, there is a more shared understanding that one truth is no longer there, so that one single simple point of view is no longer possible. Which means that, as in case of the postmodern theory, where one would say there are no meta-narratives, and that essentially meta-narrative is there. Anything that something similar can be said about simple solutions to complex situations are no longer applicable, or will no longer be able to deliver. Anything this means that there is multiplicity of structures. There is a post-structural situation in an increasing number of fields, which means that the approaches that one will have to apply will have to be, on the one hand, multidisciplinary, on the other hand, maybe literary or descriptive or map-making like, so that it means that one will have to be maybe an ethnographer or let's say anthropologist of certain fields of certain states of affairs, and one will have to be content with maybe creating maps, maybe creating situational sketches of what things are, and then trying to combine those into some sort of a frame of reference, which will also necessarily be more complex than expected. And it seems that this is only something that will become more important, more in demand across fields. So let's say, especially as companies will have to reflect how to deploy maybe intelligence or maybe super intelligence, or let's say how to scale the activity with the super intelligent software which can think independently by and large of its human operators, and then how to maybe also ride the wave of opportunities which will be arising out of the adoption of new technologies, or how to deal with increasingly complex situations macroeconomically, etc., etc. And I think that whereas in economics we don't have a lot of tools to speak about complexity, because it is not something that one can actually formalize, since if one formalizes something of that type, one also simplifies it. Let's say saying that a certain outcome is a product of certain factors, which offers a certain simplified formula, which essentially says that anything beyond that is just noise. It's just something of a residual element of a more parsimonious explanation. But I think that as much as explanations work less and less, that share of the unexplained can be also growing and growing. And it means that the complexity of the phenomenon or the phenomena outside can be actually taking over the explanations, making the explanations fall short more and more. And I think that in this case there is likely going to be a demand for some sort of a hybrid approach, where we would say, okay, maybe simple tools are no longer going to be applicable, and what will be happening is that one will be in need of either reflective tools or some sort of thinking of complexity in its own terms. And I think that this could be something of the next wave of maybe reframing how one approaches outside realities, outside phenomena on one hand, and then try to draw on the different tools, on the different approaches in an effort to come up with something that does justice to what is happening, let's say, in this domain or in that domain, and then in trying to actually create some sort of initial points of reference, initial points of actually making practice, which will never be finished, which could be provisional, that which could still be of use. I think that in terms of solutions, if there are no solutions, then there could be stopgap measures. In other words, I think that complexity will be favoring those stopgap measures, which will always be provisional, which will always be something that at each change in the larger system will have to be reconsidered, maybe revised, or maybe redone, let's say, like a map of the terrain, which changes all the time. So that means that a map is just a snapshot of something which is much more either dynamic or actively changing all the time. And I think that in times of great change, which seem to be the case across many areas, let's see, in the national economy, in the national affairs, in the social interrelations. There could be a need for thinking complexity on its own terms and approaching it as something that one will be well served by actually thinking through and by giving its due in terms of both practice and theory, and in terms of what that means for maybe dealing with intractable maybe problems which don't permit for solutions. Does it mean that any type of action is futile? I don't think so. But also on the other hand, one might think of complexity as something that will need to be reformulated in each given setting so that it can be done mapped out, then maybe narrated, then maybe described as a first step, and maybe also the only step possible toward acceptance.